From labor advocate to community activist and organizer, Sal Valadez works tirelessly to defend the rights of Latinx people in our region. Today, we have the opportunity to learn from Sal why he is so passionate about his work and what we need to do to make the region a more inclusive place. So, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Mr. Sal Valadez right here on En Breve. Welcome back to En Breve. Today we welcome Sal Valadez, the 2021 recipient of the Hispanic Leaders Group Esperanza Award and the representative for Diversity Outreach and Marketing for Missouri-Kansa Laborers District Council. Sal, bienvenido a En Breve. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm very great, Gilberto, and thank you very much for this very kind invitation to be on your show.
Well, I want to congratulate you for the Esperanza Award that you're receiving, so tell me more about this.
Well, Esperanza Hope, it's the Hispanic Leaders Group, it's the Anthony B. Ramirez Esperanza Award. And yeah, I'm very honored because Mr. Ramirez was such a tremendous leader for our community and for St. Louis in general. He was an attorney, and he had a great deal to do with the Hispanic Chamber and various other organizations that in the Hispanic Leaders Group that are still here, a testimony to his vision about the future of our community in St. Louis.
And you are receiving the award because of your tireless work that you do in our community. Now, tell me a little bit about your passion. Why you're so passionate?
Well, I want to preface that with a little story, and it has to do with, there's various versions of this story, but if you're walking or driving down a country road and you see a turtle on top of a post, you've got to come up with only one conclusion. That darn turtle did not get up on the post by itself. So yes, I'm honored to be the recipient of the Esperanza Award for this year, and but I'm your turtle on top of that post.
Okay.
I've been put on that post through the generosity, the kindness, and the willingness to build relationships and collaborations, not just on my part, but on the part of the many people, people like Betsy Cohen, Anna Crossland for the Institute, the International Institute, Jaime Torres, famous for Seguimos Juntos, Seguimos Pa'lante, it's all about us. We all move together, move forward together. And Eileen Wolfington, the list just goes on. So many people. And I'm very fortunate to work for an organization. I tell people I work for a great organization that is committed to the work that we're doing, and it's the best job that I've ever had in my life. And I've had a career. I've had a long career, executive director of several non-for-profits.
You did a lot. You have
higher
done a
ed.
lot.
Yeah, higher ed, and so now all of it gelled. All of it came together, and my wife and I are newcomers to the St. Louis metro region, and we're both from Northern Illinois. So
So wait a minute. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack.
Sure.
I was going to ask you. Tell me about your roots.
My roots. Okay. I'm a Mexican immigrant. I was born in Mexico in a dirt floor house, adobe house, where my mother, her mother, and great-grandmothers, it was just something that that converged, okay? And we can go into how my mom and dad met, but I can remember, and I have memories from my childhood about, living in a boxcar at my grandfather's railroad station it was Aguascalientes, and his station was in Peñón Blanco, which is between Aguascalientes and San Luis Potosí. So I have those memories, and I grew up with railroad people. I grew up around hardworking people, very humble people, and there's stories upon stories to be told about that. And my mom and dad always kept that story, our culture and our language alive during my life.
So in that work, then you decided, life took you to being the representative of diversity and the laborers.
Well, it came in steps, and there's lessons that I learned along the way, and I think there's lessons that I can share. But I was born, my God-given gifts were a deep curiosity, a deep love for history, literature, and a deep appreciation for my community, for my culture, my language, or everything that it has to do with not just being Mexican, but being Latino. And I can remember at a very early age, that I was aware of contradictions, things that I saw on TV and then things that I saw in my community. And the moment that really piqued that curiosity about those contradictions was the way, because where we lived, it was a mixed community. There were some whites, majority whites. We were one of the first Mexican families there. But at the edge, along the railroad tracks or across from the railroad tracks, down the street from where we lived was a community of African Americans. And I could not understand what I would hear, that segregation, and I could not understand why people spoke so derogatively of them. And I couldn't understand it. As a young child, I could not understand why, because I could see no difference. Because here they were, back at that time, they had these beautiful cars. On Sundays, they would all dress up, and they were beautiful people. Mm-hmm. And so that right there was the first contradiction that I saw that I could not comprehend as a child.
And then jumping forward, that led you to the passion that you had and that you still have to advocate for all communities, not just the Latinx community, because that has to be made clear. And also understanding that you are 7%, you mentioned, Afro-Latino.
Yes. It comes out that one of my great-grandmothers on my mother's side was a descendant of African slaves in Mexico, because slavery was not just in the United States, it was in the rest of Latin America. And thank goodness that in 1820, Mexico did away with slavery. Mm-hmm. And it had implications for the United States, but that's another show, because it has to do with the Missouri Compromise in Texas.
Yes, so I want to jump in. I want to ask you about, number one, what do you think are the needs of the immigrant community, in your own personal opinion, with all the observations and all the work that you have done? What are the major needs that we have, and especially now that we're getting ready to welcome Afghans into the St. Louis region?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say that all immigrant stories are very similar. But the story of immigrants diverges a little bit, and I can only say it in this manner, based on the color of their skin. Mm. So our immigrant stories are not quite the same, but it's all about hope, it's all about opportunity. My mom and dad brought me and my brother, from Mexico because of the situation in terms of economics, about work. We came up here to work. all immigrants come to the United States for work. My dad did it twice. He came up with his father, and they worked as braceros for the Southern Pacific Railroad in 1940 during the 1940s during World War II. Then he returned, and then we had an anchor family in northern Illinois, the Perez Valadez family, and Tia Eulalia, our aunt, was Dad was her favorite nephew.
Okay.
And so in the early 50s, they came up, or they facilitated my dad coming up. But that side of the family had been here since about 1917, 1918. And they lived in a boxcar community on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad in Eola, Illinois. And I remember in our Mexican tradition, and I think it's the same in other Latino traditions, there is the old ways of doing things and the new ways of doing things. As you become more American, you lose some of that. But I grew up with, as my dad would say, I have my rules and here's what they are.
And that's
okay?
it.
The rules are, when we go visit, you always treat your elders with respect. When you see your aunts, it doesn't matter how young they are or how old they are, you always kiss their hand. You never say tú, you say usted. Mm. And he says, when we traveled to Mexico when I was a kid a few times, he says, here's the other rules. When we're out in public, behave. He says, no me hagas quedar mal. He says, in other words, it's me, your mom, and everybody else, and we don't want people thinking badly of us. And so I grew up with that, and it just made me love our community even more. It made me committed to address some of the as I grew older, some of the disparities. As a child interpreter, you can imagine being the oldest. I interpreted for my mom and dad when we went to the doctor, we went to the bank, whatever. That's a heavy burden for a child.
Which is things that every immigrant family, community, they face when they first arrive. But we're running out of time, so I want to ask you quickly about the Bicentennial, because you work with the Missouri Historical Society on the Bicentennial. It was very important to have the contributions of Latinx communities included in that celebration. So
I want to thank you for your leadership and for inviting me to be part of the History Museum's Latinx Advisory Board. And that was that has been a great experience, and we're rather than people telling us our history, we have an opportunity to tell our own stories, and it's very important. So I did a presentation. In fact, I've done a couple of presentations. One was on Latinos and the Medals of Honor. Latinos have fought in America's war since the Civil War to the present, and by identifiable ethnic group, they have won. They have been the recipients of the most Medals of Honor. So I brought that history and also the history of Mexicans, Missouri, and the railroads, because Missouri, especially St. Louis, has a deep history in the development of railroads here, but also in the development of railroads in Mexico because of the minerals, and then they were used as a vehicle to bring cheap labor up to the United States. So there's a deep history, and I'm really much indebted to the work of our friend Daniel Gonzalez, who was the St. Louis County historian, because he sets the foundation. And then what I've been doing is I've been adding to that story by actually pulling up census data, actual census forms with the names of all these people. And there was a large community. And then, unfortunately, when the Depression hit, many were sent back, even though they were American citizens. It's estimated there were 2 million
Yes, I
in the
heard
United
about that
States.
recently.
And then, of course, an Operation Wetback under Eisenhower in '55. So our history has been up and down, but those of us who have survived those experiences have really done well. And Mexicans are the largest community in Latino community in the United States.
Sal, we're going to have to bring you back to talk more about that part of the history and
Absolutely.
the story of Latinx people. So I really want to thank you. We unfortunately ran out of time, but I really want to thank you for being here and congratulate you on the 2021 Esperanza Award, the Hope Award that the Hispanic Leaders Group, and continue your leadership.
Thank you very much. And I just want to, my final comments on all of this is it's not about me.
It's about the community.
It's about we. It's about us. It's how we, St. Louis is such a dynamic, growing region, diverse region, and it takes all of us to work together to create a future where everybody thrives. Everybody. And it's
Fantastic.
Inclusive and diverse.
Yes, we're going to make it more inclusive and more diverse as we go through. So once again, thank you. And thank you for tuning in to En Breve here on STL TV. Hasta la próxima. Nos vemos.